Good evening. I'm Paris Alston. Welcome to Good evening. I am Paris Alston. Welcome to the State of Race. GBH World, the NAACP Boston branch, and the Boston Globe partner on tonight's discussion, Democracy. Where are we now? Live from the GBH studio here at the Boston Public Library, in the Newsfeed Cafe, and virtually on GBH's YouTube channel. Thanks so much to everyone who is joining us here at the library and online. Please send us your questions and comments either on cards here at the library or from home using the Q&A option on your devices. Democracy. A word that permeates every sector of our society and is defined as a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives, control of an organization or group by the majority of its members, and the practice or principles of social equality. But it's that equality that's becoming the largest threat to our democracy, particularly when it comes to education, racial justice, LGBTQ+ rights, and our fundamental right as a citizen, the right to vote. Tonight, we discuss some of the biggest threats to our democracy: voter suppression, the banning of books, and how the United States Supreme Court will decide on some significant issues at stake. But first, allow me to introduce our panel. Joining me are Diane Huang, founder and executive director of the Asian American Women Political Initiative, and Renee Graham, associate editor and columnist for the Boston Globe. Thank you both for being here. Joining us via Zoom, Dominic Whitehead, Vice President of Campaigns at the NAACP. And joining us shortly, Ivan Espinoza Madrigal, Executive Director for Lawyers for Civil Rights in Boston. Welcome to each and every one of you. Now, when it comes to democracy, most people think of the right to vote as being the biggest threat at stake. Voter suppression is on a steep rise in states across the country, and what used to be a fundamental right is now in jeopardy. Last year on the State of Race, we tackled the issue of voter suppression head on. Let's take a look back on what our panelists had to say then, beginning with, how did we get here?
We got to this point because there are some people in this country that have a lot of anxiety over the browning of America. And rather than compete for votes, they are trying to manipulate and change the rules of the game so that people who will not vote for them have a hard time voting.
The burden to prove discriminatory voting policies is primarily on community members and advocates. But even with that roadblock, Black voters and all minority voters turned out in unprecedented fashion in 2020. But even this is spawning some backlash. It's causing more states to just continue to roll back all of the steps that we've taken to move forward.
I think the big lie was born before the election season. This is where I believe the media played a role when it tied itself in knots over the things the president was saying were a lie or not, because of the media had a tough time reconciling the actual office of the president, where decorum is shown, and Donald Trump.
So, I mean, that is one place where many would say that's where this all began, right, with former President Trump. And of course, we know that his presidency ushered in a wave of different moves on voter suppression that we're dealing with today. In fact, today Well, this is different. The Supreme Court made a ruling on the political map in Alabama that actually was unexpected. It was considered a win for voting rights advocates because many people know that the Voting Rights Act has been under attack for a very long time now. So go ahead and talk more about that and about how we got here, but also where are we at right now? How would you describe that?
Let's just start with the big questions. I mean, to your point, though, the reason we were all surprised is because we really have very little faith in this Supreme Court right now. The Supreme Court is supposed to be ultimately the arbiter of justice. We see it as a place that is actually apolitical, and it's very political. And I don't mean political, I mean right-wing, I mean conservative, I mean tearing down rights that have been in place for 50, 100 years, and really taking us back. So I think some of the preview that your panelists from last year, it hasn't changed that much, you know? And we're entering another presidential election with, oh God, like help us all, like another candidate Trump. So the rhetoric is still there, and it's, we're still in a crisis moment.
Mm-hmm. And Renee, you have written about this extensively in your columns and followed this for a long time. And I am almost certain that you're going to tell us that this was going on way before former President Trump.
Way before former President Trump. You know, I think the thing people always have to remember is this country has only been a democracy since 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed. Before that, there were all these people who were constantly and historically disenfranchised. Even with the Voting Rights Act, that hasn't changed. That's continued. It's just the methods of disenfranchising people have changed. We haven't had a real election with the full protections of the Voting Rights Act since 2012 because of a Supreme Court decision in the Shelby decision in 2013. So what happened today really was the last way of protecting the Voting Rights Act. If the court had decided differently, the Voting Rights Act would essentially have been gutted.
Mm-hmm. And Dominic, I mean, with that, I mean, are you considering today's decision a win? But how much of a win, considering how far gone the voting rights seems to have been at this point?
Yeah, we consider today's decision a win, right? Particularly for those Black voters there in the state of Alabama around that case in terms of voting rights. But both Diane and Renee just lifted up. This has been going on for a very long time. If this case went a different way today, I definitely agree with Diane. I think this would have set a precedence for states to continue to gut voting rights. I think we saw this year alone over 137 voter suppression bills or rollbacks on voting rights across states, across the country. But then also we're thinking about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We're thinking about the Freedom to Vote Act, et cetera. This case could now set some precedents of continuing to protect and or advance voting rights at the federal level to begin to bring more protections back across the country. So it's a win for the folks in Alabama. It's a win for democracy today, yes, but I think so much has happened since 2012 and probably before then when it comes to redistricting, et cetera, in so many states that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But the tone of this case coming out of this Supreme Court today with this decision definitely helps as voting rights advocates continue to move forward.
And Dominic, tell us a little bit about how the NAACP is working to stop voter suppression on these different levels.
Yeah, NAACP is heavily involved, as you see in today's case. NAACP Alabama State Conference was one of the plaintiffs of today's case that was voted on at the Supreme Court. But one of the ways NAACP is heavily involved, one is all litigation and advocacy. So we are heavily in the courts, as many folks know, across the country at the federal and state level in courts in terms of challenging different states with some of their voter suppression laws. But then also in terms of the advocacy side, NAACP is heavily engaged locally at the state as well as the local level in many states, really pushing back and or advancing policy that will help give Black and brown folks and marginalized folks additional opportunities and access to the ballot box. Voting rights is a key component of our work. It's directly in our DNA in terms of the work that we do directly. NAACP is in full partnership with many of our partners on the ground who focus in on voting rights day in and day out. But the two big ways that we're focusing in on really engaging on voting rights is one, litigation. When we see something, when we know it is not right, when there is a case that is happening, we are in litigation, we are going to the courts, and we will sue. But then also the big piece is continue to push advocacy and policy early. Of course, NAACP is nonpartisan, but we are not blind. So one of the things that we do promote, continue to promote the vote for folks to get out and vote and really connect the dots around a lot of this is happening now at the state level. So we have to be really engaged at state and local level politics when it comes to some of the laws happening around voting rights.
So Renee, we know that another thing that comes up when we talk about voter suppression, a topic that goes hand in hand, is election integrity. And this has been under attack as well, considering what happened in the 2020 presidential election. What is the role right now of misinformation and contributing to that?
Well, understand the framing of that term, election integrity. The idea was that, something untoward happened in the 2020 election. Therefore, we need to now pass all of these laws to shore up voting so that this doesn't happen again. But we know nothing went wrong in the 2020 election except a candidate that a lot of people wanted to win did not. So the whole idea that this is about election integrity is nonsense. There's nothing wrong. Yeah, there are little things here and there, but the way that they made it seem there was this widespread voter suppression is complete nonsense. So, let's get the framing on that right. And if I just really quickly could bounce off something that Dominic said, when the Supreme Court decision today was announced, the CNN headline said, Supreme Court decision favors Black voters. Mm-hmm. No. The Supreme Court decision favored democracy. And I think that's important. It shouldn't be framed as a Black issue, even though it's Black voters who are most often disenfranchised. This is about democracy. So let's call it what it is and stop making it seem like somehow Black people are getting some favor or something they don't deserve.
And we know that one of the brighter areas we have seen out of this threat to our collective democracy is the mobilization of people everywhere, and especially young people, stepping up to address the injustices in America. From Black Lives Matter to the response against Asian and Asian American hate to advocating for the rights of LGBTQ plus people, young people are mobilizing in a way many have not seen in decades.
I know that the young people in Atlanta are very clear when they hear white supremacy. It brings up older memories of that their grandfather was lynched, older memories that their grandmother was not allowed to vote, older memories that they were being family members being discriminated against up front in your face. So these young people have real stories that are whispers. And so these young people don't play. They're about to challenge authority. They're going to use all the tools available to them, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, friends from across the country, friends from around the world that they never even met are looking to be their allies.
We saw that with Black Lives Matter. We saw that with George Floyd. We saw how involved they want to be because they feel like they need to be heard. They are unapologetic. They're frustrated. They want to see a better world, and they see what's going on plain as day because they're very bold and they're very smart, and they see what's really going on, and they call it for what it is. And that's the great thing about our young people today, that they don't fall for the tricks and stuff. They call things for what they see and not bite their tongue, and they make sure they get involved.
Young people always lead the movement. I think they just want something to be a part of. And it's up to us as leaders and as the old heads, right, that we are able to transfer this power to our young people by empowering them and giving them the reins, by allowing them to make decisions, by bringing them to the table with us.
Oh man, I'm like thinking, first of all, I don't know if I'm an old head yet. I don't think
I think we're on the edge, honestly.
But it is true, right? Like, I think everyone could probably think of a recent conversation they've had with a young person on some key issue of today, and just recall like how quick they really are to check, right? And just say, well, wait a minute, what you're saying isn't right, or that's not the complete truth, and that whole sort of thing. But I do want to go back to what we were talking about right at the beginning of that there with you, Diana, and talking about the assault on the Asian and Asian American community that we have seen. Of course, it's become more visible during the pandemic, but it's been there all along as well. And how are you seeing young people rally against Asian and Asian American hate?
First of all, Paris, we were young people one time too.
Once young, always young.
But like, we also probably remember when we had these ideas, these hopes, this energy, and sometimes we're told to stay in our place, right? So this is a generational thing. But I also think like, to the degree that we can say it was a luxury, we got the luxury of being apathetic, right? Like, we didn't have to be involved in democracy. Things seemed to just happen. And for these young people, it's just an extraordinary time. So like, I think they understand what's at stake for their lives. They probably see that, you know, it was our turn for a really long time and it's still happening, right? So I think what's beautiful about young people is that they see what's possible. Whereas I think if we are on the verge of being old heads, or if we are, there is a level of this is
First
how
of all, we embrace you.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl, for giving us that from last year. So I think that's the real power of young people right now.
Mm-hmm. And Dominic, I mean, how is that showing up for you? Because we know that the Black Lives Matter movement took the nation and the world by storm in 2020. And I always, you know, for my generation, Trayvon Martin was always seen as the catalyst. For prior generations, it was Rodney King, it was Emmett Till. And so we see these iterations decades through decades. And I guess I'm wondering from you, like, what's changing as time goes on, and how is the movement gaining momentum?
Yeah, I think a lot of things. One, I think what we see, what's changing, I think many of the issues that young people care about, and I say young, some days I still think I'm young, but many of the issues that young people care about and what they're advocating for are truly issues now that other generations are finally connecting the dots in a different way. So I think of an issue like the student loan crisis, right, or the student debt crisis that we're seeing, and I know that's up at the Supreme Court in a couple weeks as well. And that does not just affect, you know, current students or younger students, that affect folks that are older, millennials, et cetera, around that. So I think what we're starting to see, young people are taking on issues that prior generations have discussed, and they're kind of taking it and running with it, whether it's student debt, whether it is the climate crisis, whether it is the gun control crisis in this country. I think there's another piece that we have to also lift up when I talk about guns, and we see over the last 10, maybe 15 years, how many mass shootings have we seen, particularly young people in schools. I think that is outrage. A lot of young people are now taking that outrage, taking that pain, and actually doing something with that by advocating, engaging, getting involved, running for office, organizing, mobilizing, but most importantly, continuing to turn out in voting. Young voters turned out in drives in 2018. We saw it again in 2020. We saw it again this past election cycle in 2022. No doubt that we will likely see that again in 2024 with the trend. So I think young folks are really taking the energy of issues that matter to them and matter to prior generations, but actually acting on it in a much different way, in a more robust way as well. And then social media, right? There's a whole thing on social media. Folks can truly run real campaigns on social media that can really move the masses in a different way.
I just wanted to say, one thing I also think with social media is people aren't as siloed as they used to be. You know, if you live in Boston, you know what's happening in Alabama, you know what's happening in Texas. That's a big difference from my generation. You know, we got what the news fed us. You know, and if you were extra ambitious, you went to the library and looked up other newspapers, but that's not something you really did that often. With social media, it's constantly coming in. So if you think about the George Floyd video, what would have been different if we had not seen that video? That made a difference. It's not that this was the first time that the police had murdered a black person, but the fact that you could see it again and again, and you could see it in your own way, not when someone else was going to show it to you, but you could look it up yourself, that mobilizes people. That lets people know what's going on. And I think that's the good part of social media, because it opens up the world in a very different way and lets people understand that it's bigger than what they're seeing, that there's more out there, and I think that gets people involved.
Now, at the same time, Renee, I think there is also a question about whether that momentum is sustaining, because we've seen numerous polls and reports, including one recent one from 2022 out of UMass Amherst, that shows support for the goals for Black Lives Matter is declining. That particular poll surveyed 1,000 people and showed a decline in 48% to 31% support. So what's the concern there if we see that, okay, now we're 3 years out from that fateful summer of 2020, but we're seeing that the political opinion is changing around this?
You know, I remember seeing a poll like a month or so after George Floyd's death, and it asked voters, and this was, 2020, what was their primary issue? It was race relations, which was shocking. You know, it was over the economy, it was over COVID, and we were really in the throes of COVID at that point. And people were talking about race relations. By October, it wasn't even in the top 5. People had kind of lost interest. I always had this feeling that part of what drove the George Floyd protests were the fact that people had been in their houses for 3 months, and suddenly it was June and they can go out and they can do something. And I think some of that was earnest, but I think some of it was very performative too. It was this thing they could do. They could take pictures and put it on their IG account, and they could show, and they could slap a Black Lives Matter flag on their front lawn, but that's not sustainable. So what happens in this country is we're great at talking about reckonings. We're not actually good at carrying out reckonings. So at the end of the day, at least up to this point, we reckoned with nothing.
I think as activists, we're always scared of the moment disappearing. So I started OPPE 13 years ago because I worked at the State House here in Massachusetts, and 2006, we think we're so progressive as a state. When it comes to race and gender, we are not. It was my first job out of college. I go to the State House, and there are no Asian American legislators out of 200. There are cities and towns, as we know, in this state with over a quarter Asian Americans, but in this building, with incredible power and influence, we were invisible, which meant our community was invisible and our issues were invisible. And it was just so fascinating to me because for 10 years, I could not convince people that Asians weren't all doctors, lawyers, and engineers. Like, I just couldn't. And then anti-Asian hate, and had to be sustained, right? I actually had someone, a leading advocate in Boston, say to me, oh, but that anti-Asian hate isn't happening in Boston, right? I was like, are you effing kidding me? Like, Boston Chinatown literally cleared out. Yes. Because there was this feeling you could get COVID in Chinatown because Chinatown equals China, ? So this is sort of to your point where you're saying, like, it's been there, right? And it took for us the shooting of 6 Asian women in Atlanta, also around, when we were stuck in our houses. But there was this moment where it changed the conversation. And I remember, like all our communities, when we go through these crisis moments, I was in mourning. Like, I cried for 2 weeks. I had a real realization that I'd been gaslit my entire life. And overnight, we went from an organization that had, at best, $10,000 in our bank account. Overnight, $1 to $2 donations started pouring in. We got over 1,000 in one day. Wow. And it's not the story I like to tell, but we had a national donor come to us and say, you're the only ones doing the work. We want you to scale nationally. And I go, I'm mourning. Can you give me some time? And she said, no, because there's a window of time where people will care about Asian Americans. So I think we're always, as activists, worried about capturing the moment, because at any moment in time, it could disappear.
Absolutely, and
but the moment doesn't disappear for us.
Right.
The moment goes on.
Yes.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, we were talking earlier about voter suppression, and the question comes up when we see that there are continued attacks on it, of where do we go from here? Because we see that there's continued to be this national attack, whether it is laws requiring IDs, redistricting efforts, the moving of polling stations with little notice to voters, or the lack of ballot boxes in some communities. So the question arises of how do we combat something like voter suppression? Suzanne from Yarmouthport is tuning in here, and it has a question for us. How can 100% vote at home or vote by mail help increase the BIPOC vote and stop voter suppression? Dominic, I'll give that to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's one good answer for that. I think we need to pass federal voting rights to ensure that every state in this country is able to have absentee and or mail-in ballots, right? We saw in 2020 when states actually, and these are some states that were red states, they actually added additional times for folks to vote. They added mail-in ballot processes. They added drop boxes to make sure folks were able to vote safely given the pandemic. And then we saw a rollback of that, right? I think Renee may have said, or Diane said it earlier, in 2020, there was an increased turnout of Black and brown voters across this country. And I think folks saw that, and folks on the other side, the right, got nervous and got scared and saw the country changing and said, whoa, we gave folks an opportunity to participate in democracy. The only way to ensure that it really is making sure that it is at this point a federal law. We just have to get the laws changed. But I absolutely agree with that question. We have to be able to provide access to voters to vote anyway and how they feel comfortable voting. And I think mail-in ballots is a very, very safe and real way for folks to vote. And I also think that folks are able to increase voter participation and civic participation when we see more options for folks like mail-in ballots for folks to vote, particularly in Black and brown communities.
I want to welcome our other panelist who has arrived, Ivan Espinosa-Madrigal from Lawyers for Civil Rights. Hello, how are you?
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished panel.
Well, we're glad you made it. So you just flew in, you jet setter. You just...
It was slow, okay?
Well, but we should note, you weren't just jet setting for the sake of it. You were in Sacramento assisting with a current issue of migrants who arrived there. Tell us more about what was going on.
Well, I think it ties into the theme of the day about democracy and the state of not just the political landscape, but what we are doing in terms of community and society. I just got in from Sacramento, where I took off as soon as news of the flights organized by Governor DeSantis started circulating in the media. And we were there as an organization, as Lawyers for Civil Rights, to assist in the legal response to the latest manifestation of migrants being flown with fraudulent inducement, in this case to Sacramento, and helping in the community response and the humanitarian response. And all of that is intertwined with politics and the way that our democracy is functioning or not functioning. And that has an impact on people of color, on the lives and experiences of brown people, of black people. And what a wonderful day to have this conversation on the eve of the Supreme Court decision, as well as we look at the integrity of the Voting Rights Act, and at the same time the need to engage in the democratic process, especially when we face things like the Sacramento migrant crisis.
And we should mention that obviously this is not the first time that this has happened. Just last year on Martha's Vineyard, there was also a plane sent by Governor DeSantis that brought nearly 50 migrants here to Massachusetts, and I know you were involved in responding to that as well. And I think so, Alston, Yvonne, it's easy for us to sort of say, okay, we're not talking about U.S. citizens. We're talking about people who have come from another country here, but our democracy presumably applies to people as soon as they touch down here, right? So how do we square that when we're thinking about what it means to advocate for these people?
Well, in my book, some of this is pretty straightforward. No one would ever say that a 17-year-old isn't a part of our democracy, even though they don't vote. And so why then would we say that people who don't have certain immigration statuses should then be not included as part of the democratic process? In my mind, all of us, including our children, are part of democracy. And even for those who can't vote, let's go back to that teenager. It's so important for us to set examples of what it means to cast a meaningful ballot, especially because across generations, we haven't enjoyed that, not across the board. And so how best to do that but to tee up institutions to make sure that we're transmitting knowledge, importance of engaging in exercising the franchise without obstacle based on your identity, and to tee that up not just for future generations, but, dare I say, future U.S. citizens.
That is an excellent segue into our next topic discussion, but before we move on to that, we do have a question from an audience member. Gail from Melrose, that's my southern accent coming out, Melrose, is asking, what actionable step, no matter how big or small, can the BIPOC community and individuals take to keep our democracy, I'm going to insert the word safe there, given the constant backlash? And Renee, I'll go to you on this one.
That's a good question. I mean, I think obviously the first one is the importance of voting. And I say from experience, I went through years when I didn't vote, when I was younger. You know, I moved around. I would find where to get my hair done. I had more hair then. I would find the record stores. I'd find the clubs. I wasn't interested in learning how to vote because I thought everything was fine. I didn't think it mattered if I voted. That changed. You know, I started to look at and see what was happening in communities and people who complained about things. It's like, and if you don't vote, you can't talk about it. So I think that's one of the most important things people can do. And to make it easier, be aware of what's happening to other people. If you're in a voting line and you see someone being asked for ID and you know ID is not required, point that out, make a point of it. Don't let people get away with things like that. I think people sometimes don't realize how much power they have and how much power they surrender when they do nothing.
Mm-hmm. And another takeaway there, I must say, is like, maybe we need to start finding some ways to integrate voting into some of those places like the hair salon, the restaurant, and the bars and clubs, right?
I mean, I don't see why not. It seems like a great idea. I mean, so many other things happen in these places where people spend a lot of time. Why not do that?
Mm-hmm. And have those discussions.
Mm-hmm. It's called meeting people where they are. I mean, like, look, fundamentally, we can talk about laws that may or may not ever get passed. The way to truly counter voter suppression is by turning our communities out in numbers that are undeniable and like registering them to vote, talking one-on-one to our communities in the languages they speak, like providing them with the information. We were in Philly for the mayoral election there, and the number of Asian American households we knocked where no mayoral candidate had ever knocked their door. And that is like a real failing of our parties. And honestly, the Republicans are doing better than the Democrats are right now in investing in talking to our communities of color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, Yvonne, young people, we were talking about how they're activating around these issues. We're also talking about the examples that we're setting for them. And we know that there are other threats to our democracy that are targeting the places where all of this begins for them, the classroom. This is happening all across the country.
Can you tell me, does equity and inclusion also include incestuous relationships, child-adult sex, and books that promote pedophilia?
Those are just some of the arguments being made by parents across the country in an attempt to ban books in public schools. In fact, almost 900 books have been banned in the first half of the 2022-2023 school year. Under Florida Governor and Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis' administration, more than 350 books have been banned from public schools in the Sunshine State, an effort led by a handful of parents driving the movement. In one Miami-Dade school, the poem penned and recited by Amanda Gorman at President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration, titled The Hills We Climb, has been banned because of one single parent's complaint. And just last week, a school district in Utah banned the Bible in elementary and middle schools, citing vulgarity and violence. But the biggest effort has been the overwhelming ban of books about people of color and the LGBTQ plus community, specifically those with race, racism, and LGBTQ plus titles or themes. So, Dominic, I'm going to come straight to you because I know the NAACP is actively working to combat some of these book bans. Tell us what's the strategy there.
The strategy there, first and foremost, I'd like to say, start off in saying, with this book ban and all of this critical race theory is not a real thing. That's the first part there. The second part, at this point, our strategy that we're focusing in on right now, it really is a strategy around focusing on school board elections, down ballot races and school board elections. How do we begin to go in and engage folks around these local elections and truly connecting the dots around what's happening? Diane said it a second ago around this piece around relational organizing, going into community and having conversations with folks. We have to go into community and have conversation with folks about what's absolutely happening and what's going on directly. And so one of the strategies we just recently did that folks saw there in Florida was a travel ban. Directly. So many folks thought it was a travel advisory. A travel advisory. Many folks thought it was a travel ban, but it was a travel advisory from going to Florida because of some of the things that are happening there, like the banning of books, the issue that happened in Miami-Dade County, in other parts of the state, in the state of Florida. And what we're asking folks to do when they go there into the state of Florida is get organized, engage. So if you're going to go to Florida, know what's happening in the state in terms of their travel ban, but then two, know what the things that you can do and partner with organizations on the ground who are doing the work like many of the NAACP branches and units across the state, whether that is doing voter registration, whether that is doing engagement work directly in the state in key areas, increasing voter registration in key areas that we've identified as a whole. But our overall strategy at this point, it really is focusing in directly on school board races. I'll say this one piece right here. We saw, when you think about Republicans in the right, they focused in heavily for years on the lower courts. Mm-hmm. They focused in heavily for years on state legislatures, right? And so now they are starting to focus in heavily on school boards, where we're beginning to see some of these policies being enacted at the local level. It's not just happening at the state legislature level. So it is a strategy around local and down by the elections, particularly around school board races and state legislature races.
Mm-hmm. You know, Renee, it strikes me when Dominic emphasizes right at the beginning there that these things are not real. How does that resonate with you?
Well, they're not real, but they're very real. Mm-hmm. You know, all of these efforts to get these books out of schools, they're distractions. You know, they're much more about demonizing the authors and the characters in these books. But the idea that it's not real, no, it's very real. It's terrifyingly real. We saw what happened with Amanda Gorman's poem a few weeks ago. One parent complained, and suddenly that book was no longer readily available in elementary schools. And what's that about? You know, I think the idea of it is that books open up people's imaginations. It opens up the world to them. It gives them empathy and compassion for others who aren't like them. And if you can take that away from a child, then you create someone exactly like the people who are pushing these bans. And so if you don't want people to think about gender or about different races or different ethnicities, that changes the way that child's world operates and how they operate in it. It's not just a matter of seeing yourself, it's the ability to see others. And that's what they're trying to take away, and that's limiting. You know, not just for these kids, but for their communities as well.
Mm-hmm. Yvonne, how do those limitations manifest into things we're seeing, like these migrant flights that are coming through?
Well, I think this permeates so much across the board. It's really appalling that we are sitting here today talking about banned books in America, a place where First Amendment and expression have been so key to our founding as a country, to the reason why tying it to the immigration issue, why so many immigrants arrive in our doorstep, because they're persecuted and oppressed, because there's a chilling effect that happens, and that freedom is found here. And here in the home of the free, now we have almost 900 banned books. And this is being driven by what seem to be extremely troubling tendencies on the ground. And the result is that we are impoverishing the perspective that children have. We are limiting the ability and expression of ideas, which is what enriches any type of exchange and experience. I ultimately think that it's because the message of unity, the message of diversity, the message of individual freedom is so powerful that is the effort to suppress. And in that context, what we have to do is speak up more. It's write more. As a matter of fact, I am finishing right now a book about my dog, about a dog being raised in a multiracial household, an LGBT household, an openly gay, biracial household, because we need to share our experiences. All of us do. all of us do to humanize this and to regain the narrative. And that also means having the interventions that have already been described. Diana was mentioning door knocking, something as basic as door knocking to be able to introduce people into the political process, and I want to elevate that. And then Renee was talking about using alternative places for voter registration. And I love that idea. In the pandemic, when so many of us have relied, for example, in the public health system, in hospitals, in medical institutions, why can't I register to vote when I am visiting my doctor? Mm-hmm. Something as basic as connecting the public health system to the elections and voting so that we're not operating in silos. Because it is precisely the siloing of ideas, the siloing and polarization of politics that is getting us where we are. We need to have more openness, more connectivity across silos, and we should start by this type of voter engagement that the panelists are describing.
Mm-hmm. And as Diana said, meeting people where they are, right? And Diana, I mean, we were talking about anti-Asian American hate, and similarly with the question I posed to Yvonne, how does this limitation of information, of this openness to other people's lived experiences manifest in hate?
One of the things I want to lift up is that Florida, which is ground zero for all of this, right? Our politicians, particularly the ones on the right, are really brilliant at dividing our communities. So DeSantis has vetoed critical race theory, has vetoed AP African American history, and then in this big bill signing, passed Asian American history as part of the K through 12 curriculum. And I was alarmed. Because, first of all, I'm having all these feelings because Asian American history was what I realized after the Georgia mass shooting is my history has been kept from me. I have a graduate degree and I never had the chance to really learn about Asian American history. I had to self-teach that before the Chinese Exclusion Act, there was something called the Page Act that literally prevented Asian women from immigrating to this country because there was an assumption that we were prostitutes. And that's not something I knew or talked about, but once I understood that, the Georgia mass shooting made sense. This wasn't a one-time thing. This is a historical thing that when Asian Americans, that were used as pawns, we are the model minority when it's beneficial, and then we are, again, like the enemy when it is helpful. And DeSantis really kind of driving this narrative of lifting up Asian American history, which is so critical, while also vetoing critical race theory in AP African American history is so fundamentally evil in its brilliance, and we have to, as a community, stand against that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Dominic, before we move on to our next topic, I mean, we were talking earlier, right, about these threats to critical race theory, or this whole ecosystem, right, of critical race theory and the book bans and how present these things are. And it just strikes me that, you know, one person, as Renee was mentioning earlier, was able to make this ban happen on Amanda Gorman's poem. Why? You know, why is it one person? Why is it one small group of people that is able to have this impact?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, I think you have, you know, when you think about Florida and you think about the laws that were passed, the egregious laws that were passed in Florida over the last few legislative cycles under Ron DeSantis, I think there are some people who are using that and taking that to their advantage, using it to their advantage. And I think that's what happened in this situation. If one person can get one book banned from a school or from the entire curriculum, for that matter, in an entire state, that's a problem. That's a huge problem, and in so many ways. And I think that is happening because some folks are truly taking advantage of some of these horrible laws that happen in Florida. I think on the other side of that, though, I think there are more of us than them that can organize and mobilize around that. And I think Renee may have said it, there's a lot of power that folks hold and we have that we just do not exercise. I think folks on the other side oftentimes exercise that power more than what we do. I think oftentimes they also are a little bit more privy to what is happening and what's going on based upon the information that's provided to them to have that happen. So I just think overall, it is this continuing mechanism around organizing, around mobilizing, around educating folks, hearing people and meeting folks where they are in real time and providing information, accurate information to people to understand how they're able to fight back, how they're able to push back and push on public advocacy. One parent should not, or one person should not be able to have one book banned throughout an entire school system or throughout the entire state. It makes no sense. It just really doesn't.
Well, we know one place that these issues can often culminate here in our country is our Supreme Court. And 2 Supreme Court decisions came down today, one rejecting the redistricting in Alabama, as we had mentioned earlier, and another that set back affirmative action. But I want to start with the one that affects LGBTQ plus rights, which is the case, a case that caught our attention, 303 Creative LLC versus Elena's, which will grant an owner's right to refuse service to LGBTQ plus customers on the basis of religion if the court rules in plaintiff Lori Smith's favor. Now, this is so interesting to me, one, because not too long ago, there was a case about, was this in Colorado, where a baker was refusing to bake a cake for a gay couple. So, Renee, I guess I'm wondering, why are we here again?
Because people want religion to get uplifted in this particular way, that you can use religion as a cudgel against any group you don't like. So what this woman is doing is she's essentially saying, well, I don't want to make this cake for a same-sex wedding. Like this, it's against her religion because she's against same-sex relationships. That's kind of where we are right now in this country. The Colorado case you previously mentioned was also a baker who did not want to make a cake for a gay couple. And so we're actually in the same place, but they want to codify this on the Supreme Court level to make sure that religion will always take precedent over personal rights. Mm-hmm. It's absurd. Of course it's absurd. You're making a cake. You're not asking you to go to the wedding. We're not asking you to do anything but make a damn cake. And you don't want to do that because that's against your religion? What religion do you have that it can't stand up to a cake?
You don't even have to eat the cake.
You don't have to eat the cake. But this is where we are. But the idea is to get the Supreme Court to codify this, and because of the makeup of the court, they have a very good chance of doing that.
Yvonne, is there a concern here that if this goes through, that it could be used to implicate other issues? Say if someone has other beliefs that aren't based on religion or are based on other parts of their identity or their beliefs, and that can be used to discriminate against other classes of people.
Absolutely. When we talk about public accommodations, and that's ultimately what we're talking about here, if you walk into a restaurant, who can be served? If you go into a shop, who can buy a cake? Or who can have access to a particular service? This is all about how we are able to connect to economic opportunities, social opportunities, community opportunities. And when you start taking away some of that, it's like a Jenga piece, right? And it could all come crumbling down, because right now what we have under the microscope is the LGBTQI plus lens in this particular case. But then who is to say, well, serving unmarried women is against my religious beliefs, and so I will not serve women who are not dressed in a certain way or are not in a particular relationship. I will only serve virtuous women, whatever that might mean, to that particular commercial establishment. You know, it creates this slippery slope where, much like the book banning exercise we were just talking about, where one person objects to a poem and all of a sudden the poem is off the curriculum, if we start thinking through, I don't want to serve these people, this particular people, and you're right, and that's identifiable. That's a group that has certain characteristics. That comes head to head with discrimination law.
That's Jim Crow.
No one gets cake, by the way.
Jim Crow.
No one gets cake.
It's Jim Crow. I mean, that's what we're talking about at the end of the day. You know, I don't want to serve these people. What, as Yvonne said, it's about public accommodations, and we know what that looks like in this country because it's happened before.
Yes.
And to that point, Dominic, what's your biggest fear about how far this could go?
I think everyone said it here on this panel. I think, if this goes the way that we, unfortunately we thinking it may go, this open up the floodgates for so many other things. It is essentially taking us back 50, 60, 70 years. Like, the country would just continue to go backwards and not forward. It will continue to divide the country more than we already are right now. So, this is where we are when we think about a case like that.
Well, another case which has a huge stake in our democracy is the potential rollback of affirmative action with the Students for Fair Admissions Incorporated versus President and Fellows of Harvard College. Now, the plaintiffs in this case accuse both Harvard University and the University of North Carolina, which is my alma mater, full disclosure, of having discriminated. They are always up in the news for some kind of stuff like this, so I'm not surprised, but accusing them of having discriminatory admissions practices against Asian American students. So, Diana, I am going to start with you here and asking you...
Fine, let's get into it.
Let's get into it, right? You may have known that I was going to come to you first. Okay. I don't know. But what is at stake here versus what we're hearing from the students?
These cases piss me off, okay? They really make me angry because... Back to my point about you cannot convince people that Asian Americans aren't all doctors, lawyers, and engineers. We are truly invisible when it comes to any sort of three-dimensional component. And part of it is this narrative that gets covered. So if you look in the media, no offense, oh, poor Asian Americans, they're suing Harvard. I just want to be clear, the person bringing this lawsuit is a white man.
Yes.
And we are, again, being used as pawns because what is not out there is that Asian Americans were some of the earliest advocates for affirmative action, because when you don't want us to be people of color, we're not. When you want us to be people of color, we are. So this is 70% of Asian Americans actually are in favor of affirmative action, but you wouldn't believe it based on this case. And so I had to I listened to some of the oral arguments. I just had to turn it off because it was so painful to hear, because just the narrative, the way that it's being set up is just like an us versus them.
And it sounds like what you're saying is this is also playing off of some of the anti-blackness that seeps into the Asian American community.
100%.
Renee, so you're nodding your head.
There's always a kind of, and I hate to have to say this, but a kind of diabolical genius in what a lot of these right-wing groups do. And if you look back to the case with the cake, if this was the cake maker who said, I don't want to make cake for a black couple, that wouldn't have gotten near the Supreme Court. So you frame it around religion. and people, how precious religion is to them. So, oh my God, what are we going to do? We can't make people do things that are against their religious beliefs. That's the genius of this. And it's the same thing with the affirmative action case. If you just have a bunch of white people saying, we're against affirmative action, everyone's going to kind of like laugh them out the door. But if you frame it in like, no, but Asian Americans are also people of color, and they're being discriminated against for these other people, that's the genius of it. They find that way in, they find that back door, and that gets them a level of credibility, and to get to the Supreme Court they would never get otherwise.
It's divide and conquer.
Yeah.
It's the classic divide and conquer. And Diana alluded to this with the Florida Asian history component, when Diana said that they approved the Asian history and they got rid of the Africana studies. And so when you're thinking through that, when you look at this case about Harvard, where we represented lawyers for civil rights, the students of color who want to keep the classroom diverse, who want to keep critical mass of diversity, because the benefits of diversity flow to everyone in that room. Let's be clear, that includes the white kids. The white kids benefit from learning with and from other kids. All kids do. The brown kids, the Latino kids, the Asian kids, the white kids, we all benefit. And so the idea that you can attack it in the way that was just outlined here by my colleagues, that is the divide and conquer strategy that we need to push back against.
Mm-hmm. So we are quickly running out of time here, but as we wrap up both this discussion and this season, I just want to acknowledge we do have so much to consider when we think of what is at stake for our democracy, with the huge social divide we are seeing, our institutional failings, and perhaps an insurrection part 2. And of course, America has always been a complicated place where activism and misinformation can affect how people think, feel, and vote. But before we leave today, I want to give each of you a quick second just to give, in addition to voting, what is one thing that people can do as we leave this discussion to help protect our democratic freedoms? And Dominic, I'll start with you.
I think one thing folks can do right now to help protect our democratic freedoms, I would say register to vote. You can go to neacp.org right now. There's a voter registration tab with our partner vote.org where folks can check their voter registration, and also register in real time. Mm-hmm. Register to vote.
And they can tell a friend to tell a friend to register, right?
Tell a friend and grab a friend. Take 5 people to the polls with you. Take 5 people to register with you. That is the one thing folks can do right now in real time.
Mm-hmm. Renee?
Pay attention to your local races. Everyone, pays attention to the presidential race. No, you need to know what's happening in your backyard. So even if you don't have kids in the schools, go to those school board meetings, go to those small council meetings, understand what's happening in your community, because that's going to have just as big an impact on you as what happens on the national level.
Diana?
I would say what Dominic said, but one step further, which is just level up your civic engagement by one step. So if you're registered to vote, right, grab a friend, or make sure you're voting in local elections, not just presidential elections. Honestly, door knocking is fun, okay? You can text bank, you can reach your community in lots of different ways. Like, people get together and do it. Like, I think talking to other voters is one of the easiest, most accessible, and most empowering things you can do, especially because Massachusetts elections, more than one has been decided by one vote. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, to the point where it's common, right? Like, you can really make an impact. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, one vote makes a difference. I think the important thing for us to think about here in progressive Massachusetts is that these problems aren't just happening in Alabama. Mm-hmm. This is happening right here. The Harvard case is across the river in Cambridge. Yeah. The redistricting case that's unfolding right here in Boston right now is exactly about these issues surrounding where should the lines be drawn. Should it be in Roxbury or in Southie? And all of these issues are coming up. So tune into that. Tune into the redistricting case. Tune into what's happening in affirmative action, because these issues are local. And a simple way of getting engaged is just keep this conversation going. Don't let it end here. Have the conversation around your dining room table. Have the conversation around a water cooler at work. And in that way, you could have a lot more impact and help change hearts and minds.
Can I add one last thing? Sure. And support your local newspaper.
Amen.
Because when newspapers die, democracy dies.
And your local public radio institution, public media
Local
station.
media.
Local media all around. Well, I cannot say thank you enough to our amazing guests tonight, and to everyone who tuned in online and who joined us here at the library for helping us to explore just some of the ways that our democracy is at risk, both here in Massachusetts and in the rest of our country. Our appreciation as well to our partners at the NAACP Boston branch and the Boston Globe, and a special thanks to our lovely crew behind the scenes working to bring you the State of Race this season. I am truly grateful for all of your help. We thank you again for joining us here and at home, and we promise to get to every question online and in person after this conversation. You can find more information by visiting our State of Race page on gbh.org, and to sign up for our GBH World newsletter with the latest about events, documentaries, and storytelling from multicultural filmmakers reporting from the heart of their communities. Please take out your phones and scan this QR code. Well, until next time, thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Welcome to America, where our babies are having babies, locked up and mistreated, babies taking care of babies.
Its advertising and marketing has become the public voice of state government in Massachusetts and of government across our country. And so it's a con, it's a lie. So there's a huge classism to this issue. You have people with Ivy League degrees, Harvard MBAs who are public officials who are pushing $50 scratch-off tickets in low-income communities where, like, the rest of these public officials and all these middle-class, upper-class folks, they have pension funds, they have, retirement funds, they have 529 funds to pay their kids to go to college, they have emergency funds. Half the state doesn't have any of that stuff. And the citizens, this is their market as their best way to change their life. So that's what's wrong about this. If you care about other people, this is Exhibit A of what's broken about America today. If you think about why we have all these politicians who keep lying to the people, the public voice of American government today is a lie. It's a con, and